All right. Everyone good? Yeah. Okay, good. Hello, everyone. And I'm so excited. I don't have enough notes. I love it. Okay, you guys will share. We will have them for next time. And those of you online, I will be sharing online as well as, thank you, Sarah, as well as if you would like to click on the link there for the PDF, you'll be able to. Right. I know it looks complicated. Do not be afraid. Right, too late. Okay, so let us begin. And I have to start recording unless I am actually, I am recording. Great. Hi, I feel like I've seen some of you very recently. Okay. It is wonderful to see everyone here today in the room, in the flesh, as well as online. So thank you for joining me.
So how many online?
Sorry?
How many are online?
So far.
No.
So I've got 5. Okay.
All women.
I'm very, very excited about this because, can anyone see, am I good? Let me just do this. Whoa, sorry, so I can see everybody on here. Okay. I'm very, very excited. I think you all know that I love Tanach. I love it almost as much as I love elephants, but I love Tanach. And years ago, when we started the academy back in 2012, or thereabouts, what the course that we started with 2 courses. The one was called Torah in a Nutshell, which some of you might have done, and the other was Tanach in a Year. It was a heavy course. Where did you do it?
I did Tanach in a Nutshell.
Oh, you did Tanach. Yeah. So Tanach in a Year. What's amazing about it is that the truth is we know some parts of Tanach which are, we know it very well, right? Today some of us were talking about Megillat Esther, we all know that one backwards, right? But there's a lot of books we don't know. Or, and this is the interesting thing is that, do we actually know them? Because the more that you read, the more you realize that what we've grown up with is not actually what the book is about, or shall I say, not only what the book is about. So the idea of a year is that you take time to do one book in 1 hour. Now, the original course was one book in 2 hours. All right, so it was a little heavier. It was 27 classes, which sounds like a hell of a lot. But obviously, well, post-COVID and various other things, we thought, well, let's see if we can actually get this even down to 1 hour. One book in 1 hour in 1 week. And what will you come up with? What do I mean? Our first session then is actually going to be Tanach, a bird's eye view. Now, the way that Rav Ramon and I have been working, everyone knows me, right? Lana, you all know me. So I don't have to introduce myself. What we were working on was this way of seeing things in Judaism, right? Or in our texts, I should say, which is most of us, what we do know in Tanach, for example, and everything is we're learning verse by verse or chapter by chapter, which is great. But the problem is you then miss often the big picture. So we thought, let's start the other way around. Let's start with something called a bird's eye view. Some of you will have done Rav Ramon's course of Zionism, the bird's eye view, which is Zionism in 1 hour, right? And then we said, well, let's try Tanach in 1 hour. Now, I need to tell you that it took me and Rav Ramon a long time to actually make this work, because the truth is we get a bit excited. And then before we knew it, it was 3 hours. So that is something you might have done then, Danny, which I think we ended up doing a 3-hour bird's eye view, but then we said, right, no, we're going to actually make this a 1 hour. So what we're going to do today then is different to the rest of the year. So even though I've said to you, come and try it out today, there are going to be things that follow through, which is the viewing of the book or the text. Sorry, I forgot, and I have to, sorry about that, Adam. We're going to look at the book from a high-level view, but today we have to look at the whole Tanach from what we call 40,000 feet up. All right, that's how high certain eagles fly. And so the point is, what do you see if you only allowed to look at it from that height? And these are some of the things that we came up with that can fit into an hour, I guess, or maybe not, we'll see. So this is how we're going to go. Today, we are going to look at the whole of the Tanach. From next week then, though, we start with Bereshit. And just in case you think you know Bereshit, I'm going to show you in an hour that while you do know it, there's going to be other things that we never see, but you only see in 1 hour. Okay? So that's pretty much how it goes. So this term, and you can also just book term by term, you don't have to commit to the whole year because that's sometimes a bit freaky, but that's how we're going to go. So without further ado then, we're going to begin. Everyone good with me so far? Please stop if there are questions. How we're going to do this then is we are going to, for those of you who have the book here, and sorry, everyone else will just share at the moment, and we'll get it to you next time. For those of you online, let us go. Let's go. Okay. So let's do that. Okay. So as you can see from the notes, the way we're going to work today is we're going to talk about, well, we have talked about the value of seeing things from 14,000 feet up. We're going to say, well, what's in it in a nutshell? What actually is in the book? When did it take place? Where did it take place? Because these are the important points. We're not going to talk about things like authorship here. We're going to talk about things like authorship, how it got into, how books got into the Tanach, things like that. We're only going to talk about that obviously per book. All right, because that's obviously a bit complex. We're going to then talk about the why. Simon Sinek very famously talks about start with why. Okay, so if you understand the why of wherever it is that you work, for example, it changes everything. And so that's what we're going to do here is to challenge ourselves to say, okay, so what is the why of Tanach? And if we get a chance, we'll see where we get to. How does the Tanach convey its ideas? Again, this is tip of the iceberg, but that's the point of a bird's eye view. All right. So on that, what's in it? So this is stuff that a lot of you know, if not all of you know this. Well, actually, before I start, let me actually ask first over here. If I say to you, what's in the Tanach? What's in the Bible? What you going to say?
The story of a family.
Story of a family. You're saying the 5 books of Moses. That's in the Tanach. But it's not only. Then what part is that? That's the Torah. Okay, so but that's quite a biggie. That's a biggie, right? Prophets. Good. We've got prophet stuff happening. Got a story of a family. What else?
It's a story of the kings, the prophets, Proverbs.
Okay, so suddenly, so we've got stories, narratives, history maybe. Okay, although we're going to talk about how that's possibly a little bit problematic way to say it. Then you've got other books. What did you say? Proverbs.
Yeah.
Tehillim, Psalms. There's poetry, right? There's really boring proverbs, to be honest, some of them, until you actually get into them, right? Did it all happen? Is it all literally true?
Not all.
So these are the things that we're going to have to discuss. All right, what's history? What's not history? Why is it there? Why not? Everyone? So what's in it then? As you mentioned, there's a whole lot of things. So it's not so simple as to, well, you can say it is overall maybe the story of a people, but it seems to be a little bit more than that. And the question really is, when the sages over the Second Temple period and afterwards start to decide what to put in and what not, these are going to be part of what we have to discuss as to, well, why would they put this book in? But we happen to know there's a whole lot of other books that they didn't put in. All right. So, for example, and you'll see that on your first page, very simple. You have the 3 sections, right? That's Tanach, that's the abbreviation, Torah, Nevi'im, the prophets, and Ketuvim, which makes Tanach, these, as I say, is fairly well known. Take a look at those books there. In Torah, you've got the 5 books, as Daniel said. Nevi'im, you have what we call the early Nevi'im and the later Nevi'im, even though that's not really accurate as you might think. And then you've got writings, which seem to be a whole lot of different, including the Megillot, whoever mentioned the Megillot, and just sort of these other kind of Daniel and Yamin, etc., etc. So when you want to come back to say where, if you hear about a book or you run and read, or even the Haftarah, let's say you see the Haftarah and it's from the book of Amos, where does that fit in? Where does that fit into your visual scheme of what this book looks like? Okay, I bought my green Tanach, which is, I mean, it's amazing. You can get them in all different colors, you can get pink and blue, etc. From Korea. But the point is, and this is what we're going to do as we go through, is when we talk about a book, we're going to say, okay, bring your Tanach, open it up to the place. I don't know about you, okay? I do read on Kindle, but I find it very difficult because I don't really know where I am in Kindle. Like it says 60%, I don't know what that is, right? But if I have an actual physical book, then I go, oh, it's like in the middle, right? Or whatever the case is. So to me, that's actually quite vital. And so this visual of where things are is something that hopefully will help you along the way. So that's very brief. Where does it take place? That's if you look at your map, bottom of page 2. Those of you on the screen, I've got it there for you. Well, this is what we call the Middle East. Always quite a, shall we say, fraught. It's fraught, all right? But if we talk about when and where the Bible takes place, so what's the place, the main place, of course, where most of the Bible is going to happen?
In Israel.
In Israel, which you can see there, you've got Jerusalem in the middle there, but the truth is, where does it start? Where does the Bible begin?
Oh, we don't know.
Oh, but so what's the name of the place? Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. We don't know where it is. We don't even know if it is. In other words, is it a real place or not a real place? Another whole story. All right. However, where does Abraham come from? Where does Abraham come from?
Ur of Chaldea.
Ur Kasdim. If you look on your right, you'll see a place called Ur. Today, that is in. I never remember if it's Iraq or Iran. Anyone? Anyone know
Iraq.
Iraq. There you go. It's in Iraq. One of the two. And Danny's going to look that up. Fantastic. Please notice to the right of Ur, to the east of Ur, you have a place called Susa. Everyone see that? As in Shushan, right? Where Purim takes place. That's your extreme east of where your Bible is taking place. Then you've got Ur, which is where Abraham comes from. Notice that Abraham then moves to the west. All right, it's quite interesting, by the way, anyone who's read Lord of the Rings, and I really don't want to go there, but there's a whole thing about the land of the west and the east, so I'm just saying. Okay, yes, if you look at that, Iraq, yes, good, fine. From there, Abraham moves to Israel, right? So, and then there's a whole lot of Canaan, as it was known. That's where, racially takes place. Then where does it move? Where do the people move, or where does the Bible's the camera move? To Egypt. So that's all the way, that's the most west that really things take place. We then move back into Canaan. That's where most of the history is taking place, which then becomes the land of Israel and the 2 kingdoms eventually. And then, of course, when we are exiled, where do we go?
Babylon.
We go all the way back east to Babylon. So notice you have this west-east movement. You don't have much north-south, but you do have a west-east thing happening. Why would you say that this is the place that Bible happens? We're holding that question. I'm not actually asking you that, but I want you to think about this, right? Place matters. We will just say one thing briefly, and that is we do know that in terms of world history, this is the cradle of civilization. This is where everything begins, writing begins. history begins. The empires, the great empires of starting from 5,000 BCE or even before, which is in Egypt, then the great empires start happening in places around Babylon, around Ur, etc. In other words, when the Bible is taking place and what we're going to see is changing the world, it doesn't help if it's going to start changing the world in Australia. Sorry to anyone who's from Australia, because no one's around except for a few people and dingoes and stuff. But the general thing is, where's civilization happening? Where are things developing? Where's it all at? Where's the center of the world? It's here. And so the Bible is echoing or perhaps causing a lot of the changes that are happening here. That's the first thing to note. The second thing to note about this is that, of course, what you're seeing here, of course, are different kind of empires in different colors. As you can see, the Hittite Empire, there's Assyria, which becomes a very major empire in around 700 BCE, etc. These are all major empires, huge areas. People are, hi, come on in. No problems. Come join.
Fine.
How's it? Come join here. And yeah, I'm gonna hand over here and look over on your side. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. So Rose might the thoughts. Right, come on in. But there's a couple more online. Don't worry. A couple more online. We're just talking about the where the Bible takes place. You've got these major empires, but notice, and this is what Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says, you'll note Israel never becomes a huge empire, and its land and the space given to it in the Torah is small. Why? Because empire leads to hubris, leads to arrogance, leads to might is right. And we're going to see that that is completely the opposite of what the Bible is all about. To be an empire, great, cool stuff for you. But the truth is, that's not what's going to work for us. However, we do need to be in the center of things. And we always are, let's face it, I mean, even today, right? Other things are going on all over the world. Nobody cares. Only care about what is going on in Israel. So it's no coincidence. Everyone, good. Yes? Good. Okay, good. Moving along. So this is just your basics. We're just going through the basics. Now, when does it take place? Now, do not be afraid of the timeline. Have a look at that. That's on page 3. And what you'll notice, what we've given you here is a history with what we call BCE, historic time, whatever you want to call it, plus Jewish time. The Bible begins in year dot of Jewish time, but that's not necessarily the same as historical time, right? And we'll maybe talk about that a little bit next week. What we've done then is we've put the main points of history that have happened in the Tanach, in the Bible, and which book you'll find it in. So the first part's very simple. It's the story of creation. There's a universal story up to chapter 11. And then, of course, we start the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then we go into Egypt. They were in Egypt. They were in the desert for 40 years. Then we come out the desert, and then we go into Canaan. And there's the conquest of Canaan. That's when, if you look, you'll start moving down into the book of the prophets. But what you'll notice is that sometimes things happen in the time of the books of the prophets, but they are written in the book of books called the writings, the Ketuvim. All right, so we're going to have to talk about that when we get to the Ketuvim. Why are things placed there and not in the book of the prophets? All right, I'm just throwing that out at you, but just to show. So, in a nutshell, what happens here? They enter the land. They conquer the land. Joshua is the leader at the time. He dies. You have the time of the judges. This is not fun. Jewish people are, as a friend of mine who's writing a book on the subject says, this is the time of our adolescence. All right, where we fight with each other and with our mother and our father. And that's kind of what happens there. And then we come to the time of the kings. We have Saul, we have David, we have Solomon, we have the building of the temple, we have Jerusalem. We have the moment where Israel is in fact the largest that it is. A little empire, you want to call it, which is in the time of David and Solomon. But of course, sadly, it doesn't last. We start fighting with each other, and the kingdom splits into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, and that is really where it sits for the next little while, scrolling all the way down. You'll notice on the side you've got a book called Malachim, the Book of Kings, but at the same time you also have when Song of Songs is being written, or Proverbs has been written. Isaiah comes into play. So can you see it's quite complex, don't worry about it, I don't want to take you all the way through. And what you've got on the side is also just some of the main people that are involved, like Elijah, right? So where exactly is he and where does he fit into the books? That's what you can see quite nicely, I think, and visually. Our graphic designer did a very nice job here. Obviously this, you go ahead and read it and enjoy, but what you'll notice is that finally we get to a point in 586 BCE, which is when we have the final exile, or the end of the first exile, when we are exiled to Babylon. That seems to be the end of the story, but in fact, we return. And so the story continues, but it no longer continues in the book of the prophets, it's now going to continue in the books of the writings. So if you look from 538, we've got Cyrus sending us back. In the middle of this, we have actually the book of Esther happening here. We've got the beginning of the Second Temple period, and the last really point in our history in the Tanach is when Nehemiah comes and rebuilds the walls of Jerusalem. That's actually sort of your last moment that we have written as a history in the Tanakh. All right, now there are other books that were written later. We're going to have to talk about that, but they're not written about later. In other words, the story seems to end there. Why? Again, something we'll have to work out. But if you notice, this is approximately what? A couple of thousand years? But what I'm going to show you is, wow, what it did to the world. But so far, what I'm telling you looks like history, right? So you go, okay, it's a very nice history book, but is it? Everyone good with me so far? Good.
So this is only until, it is not even until the second temple.
It's into the Second
It's
Temple
into,
period,
but
but this
not
is about
at-
the first 100 years, or thereabouts, possibly a little bit more. Depends when Malachi is. We don't know, Malachi is the last prophet. We don't really know when he lived, to be honest. Yeah.
So the whole thing of moving after the temple, moving to Yavna.
Oh, right, that's Second Temple, that's the end of the
Yeah.
Second Temple period, that's 70 CE.
Yeah.
So it's 400 years later.
So that's not covered in
No,
Tanakh
the
at all.
Tanakh does not talk about, we're gonna see the
So
end of the Tanakh.
why does it stop?
Good question. You're gonna have to hold on till about September.
Because I hold my breath.
Hold your breath. All right, thereabouts. Okay, so. That's where we're up to. Everyone good online? Yes, also there? Good, fabulous. Okay, lovely. So now given this to you, we can all go home. Not really, because we now get to the point, well, if this was just a history book, there's really not much for us to talk about. It's just a history book. But of course, there's more to it than that. Sorry, I just want to check that I've covered everything. I had some environmental things there, but we won't talk about that right now. Because I guess the question is as follows. Why keep this? What's the point of it? Why do we read it? Right? This is really the question. I think about it. I'm not talking about the Torah. Okay? The Torah, we do the parasha every week. I'm not really talking about it. I'm talking about the whole thing as a whole. Why do we have it written down? Why is it written down like this? And what's the point of me knowing this? I guess is the question, and that's your why. Right? Why Tanakh? Why do we in fact have this? So there is one, call it core idea. One core idea that is going to run through the whole thing. We're going to have to see if we can find it. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge. across the whole thing, but I think we'll be able to find it. But it's as follows. The whole point of the Tanach is to break the paradigms of the world. The world moved in a certain way. The world worked in a certain way, and I'm going to describe that to you. I'm
So
going to
you're saying it in past tense?
Yes, I'm going to explain to you what that world looked like, all right? And I want us to look at what that world looked like then and what the world looks like now, putting aside certain insanities, obviously, okay? We're looking big picture here. And I want to show you that what happens between then and now is the Tanach. Is the Tanach, the Jewish people, the Torah. That is what happens to change everything. The core idea, as I believe I've written down somewhere in your notes, is that the Tanakh shifts paradigms, breaks assumptions, and overturns preconceived ideas to create a world of ethical monotheism. So let's understand what that means, because it's a lovely sentence, but what does it actually mean? So to do this, I'm going to paint you a picture of what the world looked like at the time when, let's go with the Torah was given. Right, when about the Torah was given, or just a bit before that, and then going quite into actually the beginning of the second temple period in general. What does the world look like? For this, I would also tell you that if you're interested in the world of really what was mythology, the best book that I've read so far is by Stephen Fry. You know Stephen Fry, the actor? He wrote a book called Mythos. And it's absolutely fabulous.
It's the mythology book.
And it is all about the myths of the Greeks, and it's just marvelous. He writes it so well. And so if you're interested, have a look. But in the meantime, I'm going to just tell you, what does this world look like? And I want you to use a bit of imagination here, okay? Imagine yourselves in this world. And the world looks like this. It's a world, and it's really hard to do this, by the way, to strip out what is 3,000 years of knowledge and science and Torah, because we literally live in a post-Tanakh society, a post-Torah society. We do, and we take that for granted. And in fact, before I even get to that world, let me give you some things that have been said. We have in the American Declaration of Independence that we hold these truths to be self-evident that every man is created equal. Not women and not if you were black, but I'm saying but that was in those days. Okay? That's how they spoke. But that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men or all people are equal. Okay? It's so obvious to us that we have freedom of choice by and large. Again, I'm speaking general, okay? That's not what the world looked like in 2000 BC. It's not what it looked like. What did it look like? Well, firstly, you lived in a world of multiple gods. Everything, nature was gods. So the tree was a god, and the rain was a god, and the lightning was a god. Everything was a god. And as I say, Stephen Fry just builds this. The Greek mythology is the best fun, but the truth is that there's a lot of Sumeria, Egypt, they all have their own mythologies, and in each one you have multiple gods. And you know what, you don't even say, well, live and let live, and it doesn't really matter if you have multiple gods. Well, yes, it actually does. Why? Because the way the world looks to you at that point is chaotic. I mean, we're talking about gods that fight each other all the time, or they're sleeping with each other, or they're killing each other, right? That's what's happening. When rain falls too much, then it was the rain god who maybe wasn't happy with your child sacrifice, right? That's what it was, because obviously they didn't have science, not their fault. They didn't know that that's how it worked. That's sort of the first thing, is that you're dealing with the world with these things which you called gods, but really were just bigger people. You know, there were people with more power, let's call it that, right? Who could zap you with a thunderbolt. But the truth is, why would they zap you with a thunderbolt? Because they didn't like you, right? And in fact, what you see with most of the old stories, for example, the Sumerian legends of Gilgamesh and, oh, just on blank, anyway, those guys, is that, and even the Greeks to a certain extent, although theirs changes a little bit, is that they create people either because they're bored or in rebellion against each other. They generally don't like people. And in fact, the story of the flood that is in multiple different mythologies and not just our own stories, and the one, I think it's the Epic of Gilgamesh, the reason why whichever god or goddess sent the flood is they did so because they said people were too noisy. They didn't want such noise, so they wanted to get rid of them. Right? So what's the idea behind that though? Right? So, I'm not just trying to make, and I'm not making fun because I actually think that a lot of these ideas were not primitive the way we see simplistic, but rather they were quite, it's part of a whole quite complex worldview, which says that, that says, I'm in this world, but I am, what does Shakespeare say? I think I put it in the notes. They kill us for their sport, right? The gods, they don't care about us. We're just part of the world. They, at any point, can turn around and, give us a death, right? As we say. Why would they not? Well, I'm going to try and appease them. I'm going to bring them sacrifices. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if it won't work, but that's what I'm going to try and do.
But who's orchestrating?
Well, I'm saying these are the stories that people are developing. All right, mythologies.
So it has to develop from a core of some sort.
The core is when the first human being who started thinking beyond what do I eat today, right, in the sort of evolution of humankind, is saying, what's it all about? Why am I here? And they're starting to think, well, maybe something may be. So in other words, it's a development of what Rav Soloveitchik calls the moral imagination, where people start to try and understand what we're doing here. And their answer is, it's a chaotic world. I don't understand why sometimes it rains and sometimes the sun shines and sometimes there's a volcano. I don't understand, but there must be multiple powers in the world that are doing this. You hear where I'm going? Now, what is the interesting about this? Is that which gods are the ones that rule the most, or the sort of kings, the heads? The strongest rule. All right, so Zeus is much stronger than all the other ones, and so therefore he gets to be head god. And if he feels like killing one, then he can. Yes? What does that mean for me here on this earth? It means there are two things that it means. It firstly means that I can be killed at any time. I feel disempowered. I feel weak. I feel nervous a lot of the time. Sorry, I meant to sort of shout and all, but I couldn't. Sorry, door slammed here for those of you online in case you thought it was something else. Where was it? So that's on the one level. On the other level, what it says is, if gods can kill others, so can I. If the strongest god, right, if might is right up there in Olympus, then might is right here too. The strongest prevail. The strong over the weak. Right? That's really how the world works. Is everyone with me? I mean, it's a very brief picture, and as I say, please don't read Stephen Fry's book. And you can also read, by the way, and he gives a beautiful description, Rabbi Sachs's book, The Great Partnership, which also gives, and I highly recommend, that gives a lot of this in here. So let's actually take a look. Sorry, can I just take a look? Sorry, let's see there. What am I doing? Okay, so a lot of those ideas then are not what we're talking about today. So just share here as well on the screen. Take a look there. And what we have then and now. All right, take a look there. We have the gods are far above us. They are capricious, cruel, oblivious, and arbitrary. That's King Lear, right? They kill us for their sport. They didn't really want us here, don't care about us, except to play games with us or to use us. That's what the gods are like. It is an I-it relationship. I can't relate to this God. All I can do is try and placate him or her. The local gods, okay, so they're gods of this land, that land, and of course, very local god, this bush, that tree. And the only way you can placate them is through killing something to send it up to heaven, right? Which is going to be interesting when we talk about sacrifices, but in the meantime. If you look at the last part, so moral relativism is the conclusion. If gods are really just bigger, mean, and humans, then morality is really relative. If I'm stronger than you, then I'm right. Get it? What about today? Today we say, no, that's not how the world works. We know science first. Right? Now, what's an interesting thing, Paul Johnson says, the Jews created the furniture of the Western mind. The Jews created the furniture of the Western mind. I don't know if I put it into the source sheets. I might have. What does that mean? It means the way we think today is not at all that way that I just described to you. So what happens? What changes? And what I would submit is that what changes is the Tanach. That texts come into the world and are given first to one people, but eventually to everyone, that is going to change the way we think. So for example, let's talk about this chaotic idea. So you've got chaos, right? And because one God's fighting another God. But if you only talk about one God, and there's only one God that creates everything but Havana on purpose,
that's monotheism.
then it's not chaos at all. It's purposeful, it's meaningful, and it also means, you know, scientists are always looking for something called the grand unified theory. One scientific theory that will explain everything, how everything works, but even without it, we know. We stay down on this earth because there's such a thing called gravity. We know that rain falls from clouds because there's a whole water cycle. We understand that today, right? It doesn't have to be chaotic to us. But there is a very interesting, I'm trying to remember the name of the book, but there's a couple of studies really that look at why the Western world became the scientific world, started thinking about science. And one of the things they say is because of monotheism. Because if you have one God who clearly, you know, step by step takes you through and creates something for a purpose, then everything fits. Everything connects. Even if I don't understand how it connects, even if I don't understand how leaves grow, it doesn't matter. Because I'm understanding that there's one God that's sorting it all out for us. Everyone get that? What I'd like us to do, just for a few minutes, is take a look then at the first chapter, or just a few verses of the first chapter of Bereshit. Because actually that first chapter of Genesis is the thing that totally turns, that is the beginning of this whole process of completely overturning paradigms. So I'd like you in your little chavrutas, just for 3 minutes, I want you to read either in Hebrew or in English. Those of you online can read here on the screen. I want you to ask, who's the narrator? Can you tell? Is it first person, second person, third person? Why would what we saw seem to be a history book start with this? All right, try and think of that, as well as why on earth are we being told this? Why bother having this in our text? Carry on, you've got 3 minutes. Take a read through and
it must be a
and
commentator. It's not, God is not saying in the beginning. That this is some
Yeah, it says God, say.
Yes, but he's not saying.
No, no, it says.
He's not wrong. I'm just saying that God said, because I would.
You mean Moses, right?
You're right, it could be Moses.
That's what I would do.
no, I think you might.
No.
Moses is the narrator because he got the Torah.
Yeah.
He said the story. There's definitely giving a foundation of what everything's got a place.
Yeah.
So you created a human, God's image, whatever that is. It's organized.
Yes.
It certainly gives meaning to the world.
Well, yeah.
If you know that it's in the morning and something
Yeah,
happened,
I know.
but you have stayed in the story for a moment. So in actual fact, the world, once it was created, was in chaos.
It totally was.
When the world was created, it was chaos, people found it chaos.
All right. So this is stuff, we all know this bit, right? We all know the first bit, and obviously I didn't give you the all 6 days of creation. I figure we all know that what is. Who's the narrator? Sorry? A third person.
Moshe.
Now, according to tradition, we'd say no, it's divinely authored by God, but in that case, why doesn't it say in the beginning, I,
Yeah.
right?
Why can't it be Moshe who was given the Torah by Hashem and he's telling the story?
Correct, but who authored it? Who wrote it?
So Hashem wrote it, but
Okay, so if Hashem writes it, why doesn't Hashem say, I created it? I mean, God wants us to know that God created the world. Why is it, what I'm saying, and yeah, some of you, a lot of you who have heard with me know, don't just, why does it write it like that? What's the point?
To show he was a part of it. He created it, but he created it for
I
us,
think
part of the story, essentially.
Created for us to be part of the story. Elaine?
I think because God couldn't be God without people.
God couldn't be God without people. Okay. Okay, interesting. Excellent. I think there are 2 things. One is the minute it is God and it is I think you're both right in the sense that we then read it only as a divine text. And actually, while it is a divine text, we're supposed to read it slightly differently. We are not supposed to sit back and sort of do this to read it. We're also not supposed to read it only as a list of rules. Well, we know this because actually my next question is, so why do we have this? Why do we have the story of creation in our Torah? If this is actually a history book about the Jewish people, famous question, where should it start? Either the laws, start with the laws, right? Or if we're talking about the big Tanach, okay? So the whole thing, which is a history of the Jewish people, you could say, as we said in the beginning. Where would it start from? Abraham, correct? That's where we start from. And yet we got 11 chapters that are seriously interesting from a historical point of view, all right, including this one. Is the science? Is this the way the world came to be?
not necessarily.
Right? Does it matter?
No, but it's
No.
something to hold on to.
Okay.
I can plug
But
into them.
why this? In all the texts that I could have written, why this? Do you hear the question? It's not about, you're right. The point is to get to a message. We have to try and work out what that message is.
Well, you said before that the world was in chaos. Now comes the story, and it's saying, hold on a second, it's not quite chaos, because the water was separated and the light was here and the sun was there.
Great.
And
Great.
everything was put into a place.
Great. Good. So the point is, if the world is chaotic, which is the way that we see the world in those days, the world is chaos. A steady 6-day creation with very, very one thing happens after the next, it's all happening one after the other very nicely, that overturns that idea completely. And it says there's one God, firstly, but secondly, that God does everything. That God is universal and does everything, which means you can relax. That's actually the first thing. You can relax. This is not about that. So good. What
No, I said that everything was thought out, like it had a reason.
everything has a reason, good, is purposeful, and we'll go one stage further. You'll see at the end of this, right, but obviously we know at the end of every day, what does it say? Vayara Kitov. And God saw that it was good. And at the end, God sees that it was very good. This again is a total overturning. If we said that we live in this world with a bunch of gods who actually don't want us, don't care about us, made us because they were bored, whatever the story might have been, right, that each one has. Suddenly you have a God who says, no, it's all very good. You are good. I wanted to make you. Right now there's a loving God that's coming in that says, I want to make you. Everyone, yes.
I think that we need it today, especially because of what's going on. I think that's where we need to cling onto Hashem's that, you know, we are like so anxious and getting the people against it. And instead of just saying, so this is what I'm saying, is that I sit back and I say, Hashem, you do it.
Right. Good. Okay. But so,
and I've been
no. So the point is that the message is about time, it's timeless. So what you're seeing, 100%. And I think that we're sitting in an interesting place today, but what we're looking at is what changed the thought in that first place, but definitely it applies 100% today.
We all need
So,
it now to say,
right.
we are so lucky.
I'm going to move on because I have to. Okay, so hang on, I'm going to come back to you. So the first point, or the second point, is that God sees that things are good, that means God wanted to make it, that things are good, not bad, because the truth is that people saw things as the world was this mad, bad place, random place. It's turning it around, saying it's good. There's a second thing, though, that's going on here, and that is that a lot of the religions then, and it continues through to today, sees the earth and physical existence as not necessarily good. Where's good? Up there. The Torah comes and says, no, it's good down here. This is good. Not saying, we don't, as we know, there's almost nothing in the Torah about the world to come. It's not interested, it's interested in here. And here is very good. So it's a complete change in the way that we would go through our lives, in a sense, which goes to a point. I need to carry on, sorry, and then keep your points, and we're going to come back. What I gave you here as well, of course, is the idea of the making of the human being, right? Now, it's an interesting thing, there's a lot to say about it, but again, my question would be, what is this idea of making a human in God's image, in the image of God, right? So it's mentioned double. Why? Right? We always have to ask why. God made in God's image, in the image of God. God created them, male and female. So that's what you've got. It's an odd way of saying it. Everything else gets created, and the birds and the beasts get created in the sort of generic term of in their types. But the human is created. How many humans? One, maybe two. Okay, depending on how we want to look at it, that's obviously part of the discussion that we have on this particular thing. What does this do for the way they saw the world and how it would change the way we would see the world?
I count.
Sorry?
If I'm made in the image of God, then I count.
Then you count. Okay, so that's A.
That's
A is I count. Okay, good, fantastic. What else though? If we all come from one human,
we all joined.
we're all equal.
We're all
We're all equal. Yeah, this is not a natural idea. This is not self-evident. It's only self-evident now. It was not evident then at all. There were kings, and there was, maybe the chaps in the middle, and there were slaves. And as Rabbi Singh says, a slave was what you were. With the exodus from Egypt, and this part about being created in the image of God, but the exodus from Egypt totally changes that from a slave being what you are to what you do. Hear the difference? If you are a slave, and you're always a slave, and you can never change, and you can never be anything else. But if a slave is just is just what you happen to be doing, right? Not great, but the point is that you can change, you can be freed. More than that, there should not be slavery. Why? Because we're all created in the image of God. We take these ideas for granted. But that's because we live in a post-Torah world. Everyone get that? So if we just look just at this, and we don't have time to do too much more in this particular case, any last ideas though on these particular verses? Right, so I want to push on here, but just to say that even just from this chapter, we're seeing a complete and utter change in the way that people start to think. But it's going to take a long time. And you're going to need to give it to someone who wants to hear it. And that takes us to the next point, which is 2 more points on this. 1, if God created us because God wanted to create us, and God loves us, what does God want from us? Well, that's going to be the next chapters of creation. The next chapters is God saying to humanity, I want to have a relationship with you. I want us to have a relationship. There was never such a thing with the multiple gods. There was them and you, and if they felt like that, they'd kill you or they'd give you something else. That's how it went. God's saying, I'd like there to be something between us. That's why I'm going to create you in my image. And then in the next chapter, I'm going to breathe into you the breath of life. It's a very intimate relationship that's going to go on here. That's going to change then how I go through the world, is understanding I was created on purpose, for a purpose, and part of my purpose is to have a relationship with God.
Why then
But,
is-
sorry.
Why then is it specifically the Jewish people that God chose in all of it? Sorry.
All of us are created in the image of God. The Jewish people, and we will discuss this next week, in fact, in Breshit, the Jewish people are chosen for a particular journey, but everyone's chosen just for different things. We're going to talk about our story and how we were chosen. But that's why we also have the first 11 chapters of Breshit, which are not about us, because we need to remember that it's not actually all about us. All right, but that you will get to. So that's on the one, that's the first point. The second point is, and this is vital, and of course it's going to come up in the 3rd chapter of Breshit, which is you always have a choice. We have what we call moral agency. Before this, there's the gods, there's us, and we have no choices. We're just going to scrabble our way through life and hope for the best. God says, you can reach me. You can get as high, almost as high as I can, but you have to choose. And I'm going to ask you, which will take us to the next point. But everyone get this? So there's agency, meaning I am a moral choosing animal. That's what I am. I have free choice, huge empowerment of the human being. Now, by the way, these are ideas. I'm just giving it to you from here, from Breshit. I want to show you how it's going to go through the whole Tanach. So, everyone good with me so far? I've given you the ideas here in your notes. I'll be writing more notes next time. But here they all are for you. You'll notice that we have it under ideas that change the world. On page 5, you've got one God and one humanity. All right, and that's important. You've got partnership versus theology. In other words, theology is you believe they're gods and there's you. Partnership is God says, I actually want to make a partnership with you. I mean, that's never been done before, right? That a God says, let's have a relationship. Let's have like a marriage, right? Now, the fact is that humanity doesn't take it up, which is why the Jewish people end up taking it up, all right? So there is that. And there is that chosenness that then comes into play. We are accountable for our actions. You can't say that God made me do it. or because I had a bad upbringing, or whatever. No, the culture of responsibility, as Rabbi Sachs puts it, is what is embedded within our Tanakh, and that gives us choice and gives us power. But it also means if we mess up, that's our fault too. All right. There's nation, land, and state. Okay, we're going to talk about that as we go along. And I just brought you a beautiful quote from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. One of Judaism's most distinctive and challenging ideas is its ethics of responsibility. The idea that God invites us to become his partners in the work of creation. The God who created the world in love calls on us to create in love. The God who gave us the gift of freedom asks us to use it to honor and enhance the freedom of others. God, the ultimate other, asks us to reach out to the human other. More than God is a strategic intervener, he is a teacher. More than he does our will, he teaches us how to do his. So it's just a nice idea, but I think he sort of sums up really where we're going here. And then he says the story of the Hebrew Bible is of the progressive withdrawal of divine intervention and the transfer of responsibility to human beings. And that's going to be interesting. We start in Bereshit with one character who speaks in the third person, all right? And that's God. That's all we've got. By the end, we are filled with people, and God has slowly but surely taken a step back, and we will see that as we go along. Now, just in the last few minutes, by the way, this is 1 hour and 8 minutes, I mean to say. Not 1 hour, 1 hour and 8 minutes. Okay. Why 8 minutes? I don't know. I'll rub it on. So, how does the Tanakh then convey its ideas? These ideas that I've just told you about. And again, I've just given you really the tip of the iceberg. How does it do so? So the one way, which we've all spoken about, is the idea of narrative. And in fact, to such an extent, most of the Tanakh is narrative that we tend to get sucked into it and read it as history. Now, there's nothing wrong with reading it as history, but we always need to remember that the Tanakh is not a history book. It is using history to bring a message. I'll say that again, because that's going to come up over and over again. We're going to get sucked into the events. We are, because, hooray, it's a well-written narrative, okay? We are going to get sucked in. But we always have to remember, okay, so here's the history, let's say, of King David, or King Hezekiah, yeah. And so we get all tucked into it, sucked into it, and we go, okay, so here's the story. We have to have in our minds, why this story? Why is this story being told? Because presumably there were other stories. So why does the text tell me this? Do you hear? That's what we're going to have to do. And why does the Tanakh use narrative? What's so powerful about narrative? Why didn't the Tanakh just give us, a list like me? Like I gave you some cool stuff. One God, one narrative, one humanity, everyone's equal. Kind of like the 10 Commandments. Why don't we just have all 10 statements? Which would have been shorter, and the course would have been shorter. I'm just saying. Sorry? Good.
It's balance.
A
So
human,
firstly, it's personal, not just about us. Narrative draws you in, connects you to what could be a moral point. But if I just say to you, yeah, everyone's equal, you say, that's great, Ilana, thank you very much. But if I say to you, God created every person in the image of God, right? There's a vision you get, there's a visual that you get that is much more powerful than my simple statement. And Rabbi Sachs talks about this difference between what he calls a logical argument or a scientific argument and a narrative. So a scientific argument says, this is how it is, and I can prove it, actually, which actually would also be kind of nice sometimes for, prove God exists, etc. But it comes, it's very logical, and you can come to a conclusion, but you're never going to connect with it, right? If I explain to you how gravity works, you think, well, that is, that's cool, but I'll use it, right, because I'm standing on the earth, but I'm not connecting with it. A story is when you connect, which I think goes to your point. It does more than that, right? and as Rabbi Singh says, you cannot test the story, like you can test the theory. Right, a scientific theory, you can test and you can experiment and you can say it's X or Y. You can't test the truth of these stories. But it conveys powerfully an idea that you will never get in a logical point. So there is no doubt that the entire Tanakh, which by the way is 929 chapters, most of it is going to use this because it's the most powerful method. And that's what we're going to see.
But surely the communities before this time had storytelling too.
Yes, they did, 100%. So what
I mean,
we're
that's
saying,
mythology.
yes, we're not saying that we did it better. In fact, some of their stories are definitely much more highly coloured than ours. But what I'm saying is that the text still uses narrative to tell us ideas that have overturned the ideas before. That's all. Right? But using rather than trying to convince us by using a scientific theory. We would not have been able to exactly. All right. One last thing on this, there is the next point that the Tanakh uses is what I call patterns and cycles. All right, so if you have a look at the little highly colored thingies, you will see that, for example, this is the book of Bereshit that I'm putting up in front of you there. You've got your primary point that of God and human is that God seeks a partnership. We have a choice to accept it or reject it. And the stories in Bereshit tell us of people who either have accepted or rejected the partnership with God. So what happens when you reject the offer? There are two things. Either there's exile, you are displaced, that's Adam and Eve. Right? They were in the Garden of Eden, they could have a good relationship with God, and they said no. And so God says, well, fine. And then, this nice place I made for you, you can't stay there. You are displaced because this is my place, I'm going to move you out. The other way, though, is you move on from the story of partnership into your own story. And that, for example, is people like Esau, Ishmael, all the other generations that we talk about in Bereshit. They've gone their way, right? They've gone their way. But those that accepted, God says, great, let's make a covenant. Let's make a covenant. And those are, of course, our forefathers.
Brit looks very wrong there because you just see Britain,
well, I had Adam and Eve, so there you go. That was the other thing. That was an interesting little, what's it called? Autocorrect that happened. The other way, though, is a cycle because, and here's this sort of last beautiful thing, I think, because I say to you, there's choice and agency, and you have a choice to connect with God or not to connect with God, to accept the moralities that God is putting over there or not. But what I've shown you is, well, if I have a choice, and then you're telling me that then it's exile, right? Then that's the end, right? No. What we're going to see is that story after story in the Tanakh, where people have a choice, some do leave the story, but others have the choice to return and to try again. And that's what we're going to see happen over and over again, and that's the cycles. Because specifically, for example, in the book of Shoftim, the book of Judges, over and over again, we get asked and we're allowed to come back. And in fact, the whole story of the ultimate exile into Babylon, we get a chance to come back and try again. Huge hope for the human story. All right, that we are never ever outside the fold. That we are never ever, we never ever give up hope. Is really where that particular thing goes. So let's wrap up in 2 minutes. Okay, and then if there are any questions, please ask. But as we saw, we looked at the fact that we got 929 chapters. They mainly seem to be history, but of course we said that they're not necessarily only history. They are using history to make a point. It all happens within a certain amount of time. Each of the texts have been chosen and crafted in order to give us the messages. And what is the main overarching message that this Tanakh is giving us? It is to overturn the prevailing discourse of the time. And even today, even though most of these ideas are things that are very natural to us, like people are equal, etc., there are the concepts that are within Tanakh still challenge people today, as Lou was talking about there. The idea of moral agency is still something we all struggle with, and that's why we still need the text. And the text is going to talk to each of us differently, and each book is going to choose how to convey the message in a different way. Each one of the books is going to do it in a different way, often with a different author, different kind of text, whether it's poetry or narrative, in different ways. So we're going to have to see how each one, in fact, does it. And as I said, nothing has, oh, that's wrong. That's not what that thing says. I have no idea what it means, but nothing has ever been the same again, is what that should say. Doesn't say that. And there's Paul Johnson's statement: the Jews have created the mental furniture of the Western mind. That's your last of the high fives. I'll just end, I'll leave you these quotes to take a look at. Just the last one is Rabbi Sachs saying, though, that to change the world and to change human thinking takes time. And that's why the Tanakh is in fact this long, 929 chapters, because it takes that long, and it's still not done. It's actually still not done. Slavery, for example, which clearly the Torah is against, and then you have to ask the question, well, why are there laws of slavery? Good question, we'll talk about that. Slavery only gets officially abolished in the 1800s. All right, starting from Great Britain, actually, not necessarily the Americas, although that happened as well. So the point is, as he says, Judaism is about the long, slow walk from real to ideal. It is a slow process, and therefore it's going to take 2,000 years at least, if not more, and it's going to take 929 chapters in order to do so. That's what is going to be. And just sort of a last statement from Rabbi Sachs is he says, if we want to go back to the point of, we said is Brave about science, etc. Science tells us how the world works. Tanakh tells us why. And so that's what we're going to delve into, and that's what the Tanakh is all about. Asking why. Why does it look like that? What should I be doing? How should I be doing it? Tell me different stories that I'll connect to, so that I'll be inspired to, in fact, take up my moral agency, and so that I'll be able to be inspired to partner with others, see the human other, and also see the ultimate other, and connect with the ultimate other, which is God. And so that's Tanakh in an hour and 8 minutes.
Brilliant. Good.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
I hope you got questions. I hope you'll come back. And Cameron, Todd, or things either way.
Your family.
Yeah, if you would like to continue, if you put your name down, if you haven't and you would like to, please do. And yeah, they seem to be in trouble. I see from some of my messages, people were trying to get on. I'm not sure what happened there. So anyway, but for anyone who needs help with booking, you will be contacted by one of the people in the academy who will help you with that, should you want to join for the rest. I am not sure if we will be here next week. We were supposed to start at the Banana Kivabai 2 streets down. We may, in fact, go back there. Just, I'll let you know. For those of you in Glen Hazel, I don't think there's a problem. Even if you're not in Glen Hazel, it might not be a problem. Thank you for sharing from the other side of town. And thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Online as well.
Thanks, Yvonne.
That's for everyone who's sticking out their house in the night. Cheers all. Thank you.
The Academy's learning pathway is designed to integrate your learning methodically in any area of Jewish knowledge. Begin with a bird's eye view at 40,000 feet, where one session assembles the core underlying elements of the subject. Then zoom in for a closer look at 10,000 feet, the nutshell view, deepening your knowledge along key themes and axes in several sessions. The deeper dive course focuses sharply on the details, while in-depth study examines your subject of choice, Beit Midrash style, across a whole year. Over 10 years, the Academy journey has captivated thousands of adult learners. Isn't it time you joined the community of thinkers?